Okay. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for being here with us today. It is our first time doing this Google Hangouts, so I hope we can all enjoy this time together, opening up a dialogue on the half Japanese experience and talking about the upcoming release of the DVD, which, just to remind everybody, is on the 3rd of April. 皆様、こんにちは。今日は初めてライブチャットのイベントになります。参加者の皆様に来ていただきありがとうございます。今日は皆様とご一緒にハーフの経験と映画についてお話ししたいと思います。In order to buy the film, please go to www.hafufilm.com/buy-and-rent. hafufilm.com/buy-and-rent. OK? DVD の、一般向け販売まであと1週間、買うためには、購入するためにはホームページからできます。で、アドレスはこちらになります。はい。Sharing. Also, for all of you viewers, you may participate live via Twitter by using #HafufilmLive. We are giving a free DVD signed by the directors to the best question or comment. We also have a Q&A app where you can type our questions directly into the Google Hangouts event itself. So if there's anybody watching from Google+, please use the app that I will activate now. Okay. で、観客の皆様は、こちらのイベントの Q&A アップかツイッターを通して、参加できます。ハッシュハーフフィルムをつけてください。一番興味深いコメントや質問に、限定版 DVD をプレゼントします。Okay, so first of all, I would like everybody to briefly introduce themselves. I will be asking each one for your name, mix, occupation, and the country that you are in currently. それでは皆様、はじめに、自己紹介をやりたいと思います。お名前とミックス、職業と今住んでいるお国をお願いします。じゃあ、それは最初、私から始めます。I will start with me. I am Lara Perez-Takagi. I am director and co-producer of Hafu Film. My mix is Spanish from Spain and Japan. My occupation is an indie filmmaker. And right now I am currently in Vancouver, Canada. Next, Megumi, please go ahead.
Hello everyone, 皆さんこんにちは。My name is Megumi Nishikura. Nishikura Megumi と申します。Half Japanese and half Irish American. アイルランド系アメリカ人と日本のハーフです。で、今日はブルックリン、ニューヨークからつながってます。I'm connected from Brooklyn, New York today.
Oops, sorry. Next person, we have Jeff Chiba Sterns.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Jeff Chiba Sterns. I'm a director and producer from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. So Laura and I are kind of in the same city. Well, we are in the same city, just not next to each other. And essentially, I made a film called One Big Hapa Family. It was a feature documentary a while back that looked at why my Japanese Canadian family intermarried with other nationalities and ethnicities. Basically, I am Japanese, English, Scottish, Russian, and German.
Wow, great mix. All right, next we have Ivy.
Hi, my name's Ivy. I'm now living in Montreal, Canada. That's where I'm calling from. And my job is I'm a filmmaker and a translator, and I did the English subtitles for Hafu.
Excellent, thanks so much.
Next am I supposed to say my mix? My mix is Japan and Canada.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
Next person is Winton.
どうも、What's up guys? My name is Winton Yuichiro White. 僕の名前は Winton Yuichiro White です。職業は、クラフトビール業界と、フリーランスのクラシックミュージシャンです。 My occupation is in the craft beer industry. I work at Anchor Brewing Company, and I'm also a freelance classical musician. ミックスは、日本とアメリカのハーフです。And my mix is half white American and Japanese.
Cool. Next person we have Cherry.
Hi everyone, my name is Cherry Mio Rhodes. はじめまして、ローズチェリーミオと申します。My mix is Japanese and American. I'm currently calling from Seattle, Washington, which is just as rainy as Vancouver. And I currently work as I work in a cultural exchange nonprofit, and I help Japanese kids adjust to life in the States.
Okay, hello, my name is Kim North. I'm half Japanese, half Scottish, and I'm a kindergarten teacher, and at the moment I'm calling from Scotland.
Great. Excellent.
Nice to meet everyone.
Okay, let's have Mariko.
Hi everyone, my name is Mariko Huis. I'm half Dutch, half Japanese. I'm a student, I'm studying Chinese at the moment, and I'm calling from Holland. よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。
Hello, my name is Rika Yasui Hamann. I am currently living in Copenhagen in Denmark. I am half Japanese and half Danish, and I am a film director.
I would like to ask Rika and Cherry how you heard about the movie, and what did you think when you heard that it was being made for the first time? はじめに、質問をしたいと思います。リカさんとチェリーさん。この映画のことを、どのように知りましたか？制作されているって聞いたときはどう思いましたか？最初はじめにじゃあ、リカさんお願いします。Please, Rika.
Okay. So the first time I heard about it was actually while you were still filming, I think, because my former camera work teacher called me and asked if I wanted to be a part of that documentary. So I didn't know much about it. I just knew that you were making something about half Japanese people. So I didn't think that anything in particular about it before I saw the trailer, where I found that it was very interesting, and but I never got to see the movie yet because the only time it came out here in Copenhagen, there were so many people who wanted to see it that I didn't get a ticket for it. But yeah, I was very thrilled about the idea of this movie, and I think it can open up a lot of interesting dialogues, not just about half Japanese, but just the fact of being a mixed person and what it all involves.
Great, thank you, Rika. Okay, so next we have Cherry. How did you hear about the movie? What did you think the first time you heard it was being made?
Okay, so if I remember correctly, I was sort of an internet hermit, and then I got Facebook in 2011, so sort of late in the game, I know. But it popped up as one of the pages that I might be interested in, and then the Facebook algorithm was totally correct there. I was like, oh my gosh, like this is finally being made. It's about time. And what was really cool about it was that it was a film about the Hafu experience by Hafu people, which I don't think has ever been done. And you know, so much of the Hafu experience in Japan is perpetuated by, you know, just the talento type people you see on TV, and it's all very superficial. So I was very excited to see something that showed more in depth about various Hafu people and their completely different and yet similar experiences.
Thank you, Cherry. I just wanted to clarify for everybody who's watching live, 皆様今日見ていただいている生放送は、後から YouTube にアップする予定です。こちらは英語で話している方の、下には日本語の字幕が つきますのでご安心ください。So we're going to go to the next question. 今日は、スペシャルゲスト、ジェフ・チバ・スターンズが皆様、私たちと一緒に、ライブチャットに参画することができました。ぜひ彼からのお話をちょっとだけ聞きたいと思います。Jeff, we're so happy to have you today here with us. Thanks so much for joining. We would like to hear from you a little bit about your film and what made you want to make One Big Hapa Family.
Great, yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's going to be part of this, and I think it was really kind of cool kind of meeting you guys early on. I think sort of near the tail end of you guys making your film, Hafu, after I kind of made, my film came out in 2010, and it explored sort of why my Japanese-Canadian family, after my grandparents' generation, 100% of them had married interracially or outside of the Japanese-Canadian community. And this was sort of reflective of the national average of a 95% intermarriage rate amongst Japanese Canadians. And so that's pretty high when you kind of look at sort of the general sort of intermarriage rates across Canada. I think the second highest was maybe 50% amongst African Canadians. So I kind of wanted to explore why was it so high for the Japanese Canadians and what were the factors that surrounded that. I'm looking at sort of the historical aspect of it with the Japanese-Canadian internment, as well as just sort of the idea that the Japanese Canadians had been sort of spread across Canada after the internment to settle in sort of smaller areas as opposed to having one concentrated area like a Japantown that used to be in Vancouver prior to World War II. And then that kind of looks at 4 generations of my family, basically sort of the elders, and then the 3rd generation, the Sansei, and now my generation, the Yonsei, and sort of basically how we basically kind of, you know, identify as being sort of mixed Japanese-Canadian, but still kind of being part of this sort of Nikkei community that exists in Canada. And there's sort of a look at sort of how is Japanese-Canadian identity shifting and evolving as our faces are shifting and evolving as well with the sort of continued mixing. You know, now we have, my cousins have children who are sort of, quote-unquote, a quarter Japanese or an eighth Japanese. So, you know, how much are we actually identifying as being Japanese-Canadian? How are we looking at the idea of being Canadian? And how does this sort of fit into the larger context, I guess, of national identity, really? Yeah, so the film kind of explored all those aspects and kind of took me 4 years to sort of craft a film that looked at, you know, how the children sort of perceive their own mixed identities, how the parents of the children sort of, you know, I guess, did they ever discuss this with the children, the identity? How did they see themselves as being Nikkei or Japanese Canadian? And then sort of how the elders sort of had to sort of accept the fact that this was sort of the way the community was moving. Because after World War II, there was a lot of racism towards the Japanese Canadians. And so a lot of the pressure that was there for their children to marry within the community had sort of alleviated because a lot of, I think, obviously there were many factors, but you know, the idea that there wasn't so much pressure now that we had to stay within the communities. I think in order to become more Canadian, we had to start looking more Canadian. I think that was sort of the general idea behind why there was a lot of intermarriage after World War II. Yeah, and so I think that there's a lot of similarities in the sense that, you know, we look at identity and that mixed race identity. That is a very large topic, I think, in North America, and obviously, you know, what's happening in Japan and with what's happening with your film, Hafu.
Thanks, Jeff. Is there anybody in the room who would like to ask Jeff any questions about his film?
What is the premise of your film?
Essentially, the premise looks at, I was at a Japanese-Canadian reunion on my mother's side of the family, and I had looked around at all the children and realized that all of the children were mixed, right? That I guess there weren't any quote-unquote full Japanese-Canadian kids, and I don't know why I didn't clue into that, but you know, growing up, all of my cousins were quote-unquote half Japanese, and so it was sort of a personal journey to figure out, you know, why in my family had everyone sort of all of a sudden intermarried after my grandparents' generation, because prior to that there had been no intermarriage in the family. And so you know, what happens now that we have all this sort of mixing and blending that is happening in the family, and looking at the dynamics of, okay, there's sort of no going back to sort of the traditions that maybe were apparent a few generations ago, and how, you know, I guess the idea of purity also kind of comes into play, you know, in the sense that this is now the changing face of Canada, right? You know, multiculturalism is something that was promoted very heavily in the 80s and 90s, and we're looking at kind of like what's happening now, because we're getting to the point where there's a lot more sort of mixing and blending that's happening in areas like Vancouver and Toronto. And so we think about, you know, these centers and how much mixing is happening. They're saying that Vancouver could have a mixed race majority probably in the next 50 years. And when you think about that, I started a festival up here called Hapapalooza. And Hapa, for those of you who may not know that expression or term, that's a Hawaiian word that sort of was being used in sort of the context of sort of describing people of a mixed background. So if you're Hapa Haole, you know, that would be someone who was Hawaiian sort of mixed with a foreign or Caucasian sort of background. The short of it, Hapa made its way to North America as sort of a term that was being used to describe mixed kids, and particularly mixed Pacific Islander or Asian ancestry. And so Hapa kind of became kind of a buzzword up here, and there's been some controversy surrounding the word Hapa, as there's probably been around Hafu and other terms used to describe mixed people. But I think in the film we also explore that as well. So, you know, the general idea is sort of having, you know, finding this idea that there is a community or a demographic or a tribe, you know, that we can associate with. And I think, you know, this is why Hapapalooza was started up here, which was sort of a celebration of multi-ethnic arts and identity. And so every September we hold this 5-day festival that sort of looks at all these sort of aspects of music, literature, film, and we sort of explore the mixed experience here in Vancouver. That was a long-winded question or answer. Sorry about that.
No, that's great, because I was also curious about how personal this film was to you and what drove you to making it. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah, and Jeff, it's not just like 3 cousins, right? Like, how many cousins do you have that are?
There's like, yeah, there's tons. There's you know, if you look at the full family, I bet there's at least 50 cousins who all have had now children, and like our family reunions are about 125 people large, you know, and that's not including everyone that couldn't make it. But you know, I think this topic was really strong for me. I do a lot of filmmaking that looks at sort of the multi-ethnic experience, and my first film was called What Are You Anyways, which is pretty much the quintessential question towards people of a mixed background. And, you know, that film looked at my experiences growing up in Kelowna, British Columbia, which is a smaller city in Canada, being someone who felt like a minority their entire lives, even though I was 4th-generation Canadian. And I think through that exploration that I had, through those experiences, that people would sort of always question my background and always ask me what I was, it wanted me to further the conversation with a larger documentary like this One Big Hapa Family. The first film was an 11-minute film for the CBC that was an animated film that kind of reflected you know, my experiences, which I think you can find on YouTube if you just type in What Are You Anyways. And essentially, so One Big Hapa Family became a larger extension of that as a personal exploration.
Cool, thank you. You also made yellow sticky notes that's gone viral on YouTube, I think, right?
Yeah, I think as a filmmaker, I dabbled between, you know, animation and documentary, and sometimes I put them together and make these animation documentaries, which some people call Ani-docs. The yellow sticky note kind of film is basically a film created all on Post-it notes. Like this. Let's hit his Toko. But anyways, it's a giant stack of Post-it notes, and it kind of looks something like this, if I can grab, you know. So I basically just draw on these, and we've had some success with that film because, again, more of an autobiographical kind of feel to the film, but at the same time very personal. And yeah, you can just Google yellow sticky notes. It comes up right away on YouTube. And a lot of the filmmaking I do, I think, is very self-reflective and very sort of autobiographical in that sense because, you know, I think growing up mixed in Canada, sort of in the 80s, you were always sort of questioning who you were, how you fit in, and sort of questioning your identity. So I think that factors a lot into the animation I do, as well as the documentary filmmaking. The yellow sticky notes isn't so much about, you know, the Hapa stuff, as it is more just sort of a self-exploration and self-reflection. But it always seeps in some way, somehow. So we're doing a new film now. I don't know if you're going to get to that, but it's a film called Mixed Match. It's a feature documentary, and it looks at why it's more difficult for multi-ethnic people to find bone marrow donors if you have leukemia or a rare blood disease. What's happening is that our DNA is getting much more complex as we mix, as we blend. So if you are battling sort of a rare blood disease where you need to have a stem cell or bone marrow transplant, to try and find your genetic twin outside of your own family, which is, you know, if you have a brother or sister, they're only really a 25% chance that they could be a match for you. So a lot of people have to go outside into these national registries to find an unrelated donor. What ends up happening is that if you are mixed, it becomes a much more complex challenge to find someone who's identically similar to you genetically. And so, you know, a lot of people don't know this, that you're trying to find someone with the same ancestry as you, and as, you know, we're mixing and blending, the ancestry is getting a little bit more complex in that aspect. And so this documentary explores, you know, what are some of the issues surrounding this, looking at patients who are searching right now, and just sort of raising more of those questions about identity, what is race in medicine, and going forth with that. So we should hopefully be releasing that film in 2016, hopefully early 2016. I'm in the editing phase right now, which, as you guys know, is always fun. And you know, it should hopefully be releasing spring 2016 if all goes well.
So, is there a website that people can go and see Mixed Match, where they can see where the information about it?
Yeah, right now we're working with Athena Asclepiadis, who runs an organization called Mixed Marrow, and she's one of the only people in North America that's actually actively going out and recruiting people of a mixed race background to join the bone marrow registries across the world. So I think her website is www.mixedmarrow.org. If you want to learn more about the film, it's I don't know, I guess you have to do www dots anymore, but anyways, it's mixedmatchmovie.com. And you can learn more about the film there as well. Or find us on Facebook. I think we're on there too. Yeah, we're on there.
Oh yeah, Facebook is easy.
Yeah, Facebook is easy. Just type in Mixed Match, but sometimes you get weird stuff if you type in Mixed Match, so be prepared.
Oh no. Thank you. Great. Thanks very much for sharing all of those wonderful films that you've made so far. I'll definitely check them out. I highly recommend them. We also, Megumi and I, watched One Big Happy Family when it came out, and we loved it. Okay, so 続いて next, let's see. I'm going to ask Ivy to tell us a little bit about her experience as being Hafu. 続いてアイビーさんと、アイビーさんに自分のハーフとしての経験についてお話ししていただければと思います。どうぞお願いします。
何時間くらいもらえるのかな
まあ、briefly, or
well, my life is it's between Canada and Japan. So in Canada, I don't get too much because I've always kind of lived in a multicultural environment. But when I'm in Japan, it's always interesting to see how people kind of deal with me. For instance, I remember one case where I was traveling in Japan with a Korean friend of mine, a girl who was full Korean, and we were on the train station platform, and this middle-aged woman came up to us and asked her, "Is this the train to wherever?" And I kind of looked over, and my friend was like, "What is going on?" And I looked over and I said, "Oh, I think you're looking for the other platform." And the look on her face when she saw me speaking Japanese was just of utter bewilderment, and she couldn't wrap her head around the fact that that such a foreign-looking person would be speaking Japanese. But that's kind of an extreme case. I think people tend to be more, I don't want to say understanding, that's not the word I'm looking for, but they're not as surprised as they used to be to see people like us, I think, around. I mean, I go back there a lot. I go back there every 6 months or so for, a month at a time. I was living there for 5 years until fairly recently. And I think it does have partially to do with the whole hafu talento thing, which I have very mixed feelings about. But that more visibility means more, again, not the right word, but tolerance or understanding, I think, or a desire to know more, a desire to understand. One interesting experience I had the last time I was back was I was riding the train with one of my really good friends who is full Japanese, and I pointed out an advertisement on the train of I guess, what's her name again? I can't remember her name, but she's this half Japanese girl who always does the like commercials for like hair removal. Do you guys know what I'm talking about?
No.
Anyway, I would say she looks more white than Japanese, but there's something about her that is just like, I don't know, she's kind of, well, the way my friend put it was that, it's like, it's easy to relate to her because she's not exactly like one of us. And I was like, what does that mean? And she said it was like some sort of goal to aspire to, which I found a little troubling. And like, why can't you be who you are and I be who I am? And I think it has to do a lot with the Japanese culture of kind of groupthink, or moving as a group as opposed to being an individual and being proud of who you are and being proud of your own characteristics. So I don't know. It's like I think that I could keep talking about this for ages and ages. I have very strong feelings about it. Luckily, I have never been bullied explicitly because of my appearance or my dual culture. But I have heard of people who have been, and so I consider myself very lucky to have been in that mixed environment pretty much my whole life. So, I'd be curious to hear what other Hafu have to say about it too, and the film is so great for that because it's a nice cross-section of people in a different Hafu experience. So that's about it for me. I've got tons more, but I think I'd like to give a chance to other people to speak as well. And
thanks so much for sharing your story, Ivy. That was great. I'd like to ask, I'm very curious about what the Hafu experience is like in Europe. So I'd like to ask Rika. You're right now based in Denmark, right?
Yes, I'm based in Denmark. I actually lived in Tokyo for 4 years, and then I came back in 2011, but I grew up in Denmark.
How was it like growing up in Denmark?
It was actually kind of interesting also to hear when we talked about the one big Hafu family, that it was about the 80s, or growing up in the 80s, and I thought it was kind of interesting because at the time when I was at school, we were very few Asians, and so it was like, well, I mean, I was bullied a lot, but for example, my sister wasn't, so maybe I was a bit unlucky too, but it was a very kind of you were kind of foreign if you were Asian looking, and yeah, so it was kind of easy to become this target. And it was kind of I've thought about it later on, that it was kind of interesting that for example, if I went to Japan, I was also looked at as being foreign, but it was more a sort of fascination for like the white skin and the brown hair and that kind of thing, that because the ideal is to have white skin and having a lighter colored hair and all that. So people were more like admiring you just for your looks. but you were still like looked at as being different.
An exotic animal.
Yeah, exactly. And then in Denmark, it was more like either you're just I don't know, like a lower type of person, or just you're just different. You get a lot of questions about like where you're from, and or they talk to you automatically in English because they think you don't speak Danish or things like that. But it's and then now it's much more mainstream, because then there was this wave where suddenly it became possible to adopt children and babies from Korea. So there was this wave of Asian-looking children coming to Denmark, and after that, little by little, it's just become much more normal to see someone who's like not even half, but like completely Asian-looking, and then they just speak Danish as if they were born here and all that. So now people are much more open to this. So that's how.
Actually, that's funny. I have a friend who's one of those Korean adopted children, and I was more surprised because he spoke in English with a Scandinavian accent. So I was like, oh, wait a minute, where are you from? Because he looked completely Korean. So I didn't really know where to place him. But that's great. I also have I've heard stories of people who went to school in Japan, and because they had lighter colored hair, the teachers would ask them if they had dyed it, and they had to explain, well, no, this is my actual real hair color. So, what do you want me to do? Do I have to dye it black or?
Yeah, I had that one too.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to ask Winton, who is also a very interesting case. You actually grew up in Yokohama, right?
Yokosuka.
Yokosuka. Okay, yeah. Sorry about that.
Close enough.
You grew up in Japan, and then you moved to the United States afterwards. Tell us a little bit about how your experience has gone so far.
This is growing up as someone who's Hafu?
Oh, yeah. That's what I meant, yes.
Okay. Growing up in Yokosuka, I was in a smaller part of that smaller city, and I definitely went through some bullying, a good handful of bullying by kids in the neighborhood, and as well as in Hoikuin and Yochien, which is kindergarten. But fortunately, I was able to go to school on the Navy base, American Navy base in Yokosuka. But afterwards, then I moved to California to study music in Los Angeles. And then I moved up to San Francisco, and it's pretty different because people are used to diversity in general in the bigger parts of the state of California, and especially San Francisco, since it's a very international, intercultural, metropolitan city. And so it's been fine ever since moving here. But interestingly enough, in Japan, I'm more and more, and maybe just as we get older, our looks change. So in Japan, more and more, I look gaijin, and people would assume that I'm not remotely Japanese, and they'll just, immediately, if they hear me speak Japanese, and it's common, they'll say that, wow, Nihongo jouzu desu ne, like your Japanese is really good. But in America, I'm looked as just general Asian.
For sharing your story, Winton. You also composed the score for Hafu. Would you like to share a little bit about how that went and how you decided to choose the tunes that you did for a movie?
Yeah, sure. So when I found out about you guys through a mutual friend, Marcia, I was so interested in it, and I would say during that time, me as someone who's Hafu, was especially just wanting to draw close to my Japanese roots. And since growing up in Japan, that is my home still. And when I found out about this film, I got so excited about it because I'm naturally about community with people and gathering, and so a film about exposing to the world, but primarily Japan, to let people know that, hey, you know, we exist and there's this aspect that we go through and blah blah blah. I really wanted to be involved. So when I got in contact with, I believe it was Megumi first, we started talking, and I said I'd be glad to help out as much as I can, and I'd be willing to just give my time. Later on, you guys allowed me to join your team, and I've been able to really excited to be part of this Hafu film crew, I guess you could say, as a composer. So some of the music, I tried to incorporate some Japanese elements. There's a hanabi scene in which I tried to create this very dreamy, fantastical, like almost celestial sound using the koto sound, but multiple kotos on the track, adding a lot of reverb, so it adds this dreamy kind of state, but with some synthesizer strings, timpani to build drama into it. And whereas there's others where there's no real Japanese element, but I was able to write some house music and bossa nova. Bossa nova I found appropriate because bossa nova is still somewhat at least well known in Japan, but very popular in Japan around the 60s or 70s. So I try to think of all those things when writing the music.
Actually, speaking about that song that you mentioned about the hanabi scene, I had a friend from Spain, a person that I knew who went to see the, went to one of our screenings in Madrid. He asked me, where can I find this song where the fireworks of Sophia's scene? It was so cool. That's where I felt the most immersed in the film, and I felt I was in Japan, and it was so amazing. And so I just forwarded, I think you had the track on SoundCloud or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I sent him the link, and he was like, oh, yeah, this is it. He's all excited about it.
That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, so, you did a great job, and we were just so grateful for this fantastic score that we got. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I feel very blessed that you allowed me to just be involved with it. It just made me really happy.
Thank you, Winton. Okay, let's see. Now we have Kim Asakawa North, Kim-san. I would love to hear your experience on being Hafu. Kim, we met in Osaka, I believe. Let me see if you can unmute yourself. Kim is frozen. Let's see if she's back.
Sorry, I think my connection is pretty bad.
No
worries.
Can
you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, my experience I grew up mostly in Scotland, and I'm from a really small town, so being any different someone locally was just, I think there were 2 other families in my town that were Chinese, and I remember growing up always being confused with Chinese, and the other boy, we were always teased about it together, like, people were like, oh, are you going to get married when you grow up? And it was just ridiculous things like that. As if, you must be the same ethnicity. Then I didn't really feel a connection so much growing up. Obviously, we had influences in the household from my mother and whatnot, but it wasn't really until I went to university in Glasgow. It's a bigger city. I met a lot of Japanese people, met Japanese exchange students, and I had a lot of pride about being, half Japanese. And I thought about going to Japan, and eventually, when I was a few years after graduating, I decided to go to Japan and teach English. And before then, I'd got in contact with Edward, who runs the Mixed Roots campaign. And I think that was really the first time that I kind of met a lot of Hafu. I mean, I'd met them as a teenager when I visited people I knew in London, but it wasn't something that I really became immersed in until well, not immersed in, but until I went to Japan and I met others. And as for the kind of feeling of being foreign in Japan, I think it's different for me, I feel, because I don't speak Japanese very well. So I kind of feel like I fit more into the foreigner mold than I ever did the kind of more Hafu. There seems to be not like a ranking in Hafu, but I don't know. I didn't feel as much need to be accepted because I didn't really grow up there. But yeah, in a way I kind of see it as I'm a foreigner, but I'm also very fortunate to be able to see a side of Japanese society that I think a lot of people don't get to do when they come to Japan. For example, going to my family's weddings, or being able to experience that not just as someone who just kind of visited, but being part of the family, because you're very much a part of the ceremony. And yeah, it's just always nice to meet other Hafu and chat about experiences and that kind of thing.
So when you joined these like mixed fruits events, how did you feel? Like, what did you think about the whole thing?
I felt it was quite exciting, really. Yeah, I'd never really had a chance to kind of hang out with lots of different Hafu in one place, rather than, meeting one or two here or there. And, I think that was really the point when I realized that Hafu can be a community rather than just, kind of random people I'd met throughout my life, but, a shared experience. Even though the other half might be something completely different, there's still something that connects everyone, that you can kind of, laugh about and joke about, or, just share experiences. So that was really kind of the first initiation into the community, so to speak.
Okay, thank you very much, Kim. Next, I would like to ask Mariko, who you and your sisters just recently organized a community screening in the Netherlands, and I heard it was really great, a really great experience for everybody, and so I'd love to hear a little bit about how that went. 次に、マリコさん、最近ご家族と一緒に、オランダでハーフの上映会を企画したって、聞いたんですけれども、この経験はどうでしたか? How was it?
Yeah, actually it was just 1 week ago, last Sunday, and it was really great. There was about 80 people, and it was a great mix of people. There were Dutch people and quite some Hafus and some Japanese people, and also some students who were studying Japanese. Well, everyone, had some kind of connection to Japan, and I heard there were great reactions from after this event. Many people were very emotional or very excited, and that finally, their feelings were showed, and so others could also understand how they felt, and also to meet other people. It was a great opportunity to meet other Hafus. We've never organized such an event before, but there are quite some Hafus in the Netherlands as well. So it was a really great day to meet others and just share our experiences. And we are also thinking about organizing a half a day again so we have more time to chat with each other and to get to know each other a bit more. It was a really great day, and everybody was so enthusiastic about the film. Thank you so much.
Thank you for organizing, you and your family who organized the screening for us. We are really delighted to have been able to reach such a wider audience. Megumi, is there something you'd like to share about this, about reaching a wider audience?
It's been an incredible experience. We've been screening the film for almost 2 years. Actually, April 5th will be the 2-year anniversary since our film premiered in Los Angeles at the Hapa Japan Festival. And it's really gone worldwide. I mean, we've had screenings in kind of every, well, not every continent, but close to every continent. I think the film has been seen by tens of thousands of people, and it's really incredible to see how there are Hafu communities throughout the world, and how we all seem to, even though we have a very diverse experience, all seem to be able to still kind of relate. There's something common that we connect to. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And I think that was also evident during the filmmaking process, because while we were making films, I think Winton hinted at it a little bit, but like we would really just meet half Japanese people with different talents, working in different fields. Ivy contributed the subtitles. We had some, Hafu people who did motion graphics and graphic design. They came out of the woodwork essentially and said, I have a talent and I have a passion for getting these stories out there. And so that's how this film came together. So it's been an incredible journey for sure.
Thank you, Megumi. Thank you, Megumi. Okay, let's see. Well, I think now we could start to check out our questions directly coming in from our Twitter feed. Just so that remind everybody, we're giving away a free limited edition DVD. It looks like this. It has a white cover signed by the directors. We're giving this away, so if you want a copy, make sure you ask a really awesome question on our Twitter. 皆様、今から、ツイッターのライブフィードから、質問を、選びたいと思います。めぐみさんからちょっと、フォローしていただいてましたので、もし面白い、興味深いコメントか、フィード、ツイッターの中の質問がありましたら、皆様とシェアしていただければと思います。お願いします。
Sure, I'm just going to pull a couple of questions that I think hopefully maybe all of us can answer.
Yeah. Oh yeah, just to clarify, this is so that all of us in the room can answer comments and get involved.
So Kosheno Moore, Kosheno-chan, asked the question, what are the differences you found in identity insights between Hafu in the US versus Hafu in Japan? So since we're from all over the world, we don't have to limit to Hafu in the US. Let's say just kind of maybe some experiences that you think are common or different between how the Hafu experience has been in Japan versus how it's in your own country. It'd be great to hear. And I can start just sharing my own experience. I grew up in Japan as a child and then left Japan when I was 15 and moved to the United States. And I moved from Tokyo to Hawaii. So I moved from a country that considers itself largely homogenous to what is considered to one of the most multicultural societies in the world. And I definitely noticed a difference right away where I integrated with ease. People didn't ask me where was I from, what are you. It just was, oh, you're Megumi? Okay, cool, and let's hang out. And it wasn't a big deal. But when it was in Japan, I was always acutely aware that I was different from everybody else based on just subtle body language even. Or even blatant people asking me questions and kind of outing me or othering me as a result. And so that's a big difference that I noticed in my experience between Japan and the US.
Sure, I could jump in there. So I grew up in Japan, completely in Japan, and the first time I moved to the US was for college. So but I think I moved to Ithaca, New York, which is not really the most diverse place. So what I noticed was that I was subjected to similar questions, but I think with different intent. So to get into that a little bit more, in Japan it was always, I think, well, since I grew up in Tokyo, a lot of people in my vicinity were pretty familiar with hafu and what that meant. But people would always ask, hafu desu ka? Nihongo jouzu desu ne? It was always sort of a repetition of those questions. Oh, your Japanese is so good. But then when I moved to Ithaca, it was, because my English sounds the way it does, people had assumed I grew up in the U.S., and then when they found out that I didn't, then they would ask me all these questions like, whoa, your English is so good. How long have you lived here? And all of this other stuff. So now that I live in Seattle, which has a lot more half Japanese and all sorts of other people of different backgrounds, people seem to care a lot less. Kind of like Megumi was saying, it's just not a big deal. Whereas whenever I go back to Japan, it's always with the questions.
I think there's also, if I may kind of talk now, but I think there's also this this thing in Japan of not having a different barometer, maybe, of subject matter that is appropriate for first meetings. So I remember when I mean, just like Kim, when I went to Japan for the first time, I was teaching English, and there is a unit in one of the textbooks that was like, what not to say when you first meet somebody that is not, who appears to not be from Japan. So stuff like, you don't ask what their ethnic background is right off the bat. That's not your first question. You don't ask, how much money they make. You don't ask, really probing personal questions. But I think in Japan, because they never had this history of multicultural people, and with that comes, different, maybe, let's say, taboos. People aren't accustomed to that, and so they say whatever comes to mind. They just want to make conversation. They're not trying to be rude or mean. They're just saying things that come to mind, and sometimes it's culturally inappropriate. So I've kind of learned to not get all offended myself, but sometimes I wish that I could say in a nice way, why don't we have a talk person to person before we delve into personal details about my appearance? So I just think it's a matter of cultural unawareness or ignorance. That's the issue, and I don't know how better to kind of combat that than what you guys are doing with a film like this and with other half Japanese communities and like Mixed Roots and films that Jeff is making as well. So
thanks, Ivy. That's a really great comment. I was actually agreeing to every single thing that you were saying. I was like, this is so true. This is so true. Oh my God. There is that kind of unawareness maybe when you go to Japan. People, I also get a lot when I speak Japanese and people just stare at me and they just don't know how to react sometimes, especially older people. But I also get it with all kinds of ages, really.
One time I asked a question and was blatantly ignored. I had to repeat the question one more time, and then the person was like, "Oh, you're talking to me, and you're talking to me in Japanese. Oh, okay, the answer is blah blah blah."
Yeah, I get that too. I got that at a restaurant where I was trying to order, a meal, and it was one of these super old, Japanese places that have the menu all in Japanese and kanji, tate, yomi, and I was asking for an item on the menu, and they just kept on looking at the person sitting next to me and asking, "What did she say? What did she say? I don't understand what she's saying. What did she say? Is she speaking in English?" And I was
Somebody made a video about that.
Yeah, no, I was speaking in Japanese directly to the guy who I was sitting right in front of, and he just couldn't acknowledge the fact that, which was really shocking to me. But anyway, I wanted to bring up, I am so sorry, I think I mistakenly ejected one of our members out of the Google Hangouts, and she had a few points that she wanted to bring out today. I am glad that I was able to talk to her before the Hangout, actually. She wanted to talk about how she had a super positive upbringing as a child being Hafu. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I wanted to know if there was anybody who, compared to the characters that are portrayed in our film, who had to overcome many things growing up. Is there anybody in this chat room who had any kind of issues at all?
Well, I mainly experienced it as a very positive thing that I was born Hafu, and I always try to explain to my friends about the Japanese culture, and also in high school and even primary school, I was always talking about Japan and holding presentations about it. Every time I had to choose a topic, most of the time it was about Japan. So, and I was bringing onigiris to school or bento, and I was sharing it with friends, and most of the people really liked it. So I was glad I could also in this way explain to others about the Japanese cultures and Japanese food, Japanese people, Japanese clothing. So I was really happy about it. Yeah, my sister had a little bit different experience. Well, she was also happy about it, but she wanted to be in being more Dutch. She wanted to have blonde hair, and she didn't want to talk Japanese. But when after growing up, now she also lived 1 year in Japan, and now she's also feeling very proud and happy being half, and she even speaks Japanese very well right now. So I think, also my parents are very happy about it.
Yeah, I think, Mariko, what you mentioned is really, shows the kind of diverse experience that people have. And, even within a family, you can see siblings having totally different experiences. I mean, everything, their parents are obviously the same, they grew up in the same household, they go to the same schools, but somehow they have a different experience. And it really does come down to kind of personality and, just how I guess, you receive the input and kind of how people treat you and how that impacts you, I guess, is what I'm saying. So I think there's a huge diverse experience that we all have.
Yeah, definitely.
Rika, did you want to share a little bit more?
Yes, well, yeah, I also thought that it's not like it's all bad or it's all good, because although sometimes people would make fun of you or you see that you're different, it was also kind of cool to be the one coming home from a vacation in Japan, and then you had all the newest stuff like that you couldn't buy in Denmark, or people gathering around you watching you eat because you had a funny bento from your mother or something like that, and like, because it's not everything is like out of like mean thoughts, or some of it is also just curiosity or fascination for something different, and so I always try to think of it as like that you have the choice to see it as being a good thing, or you can choose to see it as being a bad thing, and like if someone says something to you, you can either think of it as being really intrusive, or they just think you're different and that's not nice or something, or you can also just choose to think, well, okay, I'm different, but I like it, or that you kind of embrace it more. And I also think sometimes it can be easy to put all the bad things, like to say that it's all, you put all the fault on the fact that you are half something, but maybe it could also be because you are just different as a person, but not necessarily because you're a mixed race. So sometimes I also thought, yeah, well, I mean, there were times where I didn't at all think about the fact that I was half Japanese, half Danish, but I just thought that I'm just kind of a weirdo or something, you know, that it's just how I am, you know, it's not because of the international background, but just, you know, the person itself. So yeah, I think that's just something that I try to think that we also sometimes need to be careful of not giving all the explanation to the background, but also try and figure out who you are as a person and put more emphasis on that rather than the cultures. The cultures should more be just like a sort of bonus, you know, to open up your mindset. And yeah.
I was a little curious. I was just thinking as you were speaking, I was wondering, for Jeff, how was it like when you first went to Japan? Because you have a Japanese ancestry and background, but you didn't live there, but you did visit a couple of times, right?
Mm-hmm.
How was that experience for you, going to Japan, meeting other Hafu people, but who grew up in Japan versus what you know?
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes into both of those sort of questions in the sense of, I think growing up in Canada, being sort of mixed Japanese, you know, you're always aware that, yeah, my grandparents have all this cool Japanese stuff, and they're eating sushi in the 80s, right? Like, nobody ate sushi in the 80s in Canada. So it was one of those kind of things that was always in the back of my head saying, you know, you're always self-aware that you have a Japanese background and ancestry. And it wasn't until after I made that What Are You Anyways film in 2005 when I was like, you know, I kind of want to explore my roots, right? You know, if this is such a big part of my identity and who I am and why I've been treated the way I have in Canada for so many years, I kind of want to go to Japan to maybe feel a sense of connection to homeland or place. And I went in 2006, I think was it the Expo, with a delegation from my hometown. And I think the whole time I was trying too hard to try and find that connection and try to find, you know, the sense of, do I fit in, do I belong, only to feel more alienated because I don't speak the language. I was never taught the language. My mother was never even taught the language. And I didn't look, you know, Japanese. And if anything, the only people who could even see a glint of this Japanese sort of, you know, part of me were the older generation in Japan. You know, and so I kind of felt like really sort of like, oh, geez, this sense of connection, this sense of place, I'm not finding it. I'm not finding my roots. And it wasn't until I kind of walked into this bamboo forest and felt the wind blowing through the bamboo where I felt kind of totally at peace and realizing I think it was more a sense of place than it was the people and sort of the larger cities I was in. And I went back in 2011 or 12 as part of a delegation, or actually it was part of, I was speaking at Kyoto University, and I went back and I didn't really have any expectations this time around. I just wanted to go and enjoy Japan, and I just really had a much better time because I wasn't there trying to find myself or find my roots. It was just go there to enjoy, you know, the sake of being in Japan. And yeah, I'm just the foreign guy in Japan. You know, for so many years, you're the Japanese guy growing up in your hometown that's very Caucasian and white, to going to a place where now all of a sudden you are the white guy. Obviously, it's kind of, you know, it's interesting to kind of feel that sense of, you know, how do you fit in if you don't fit in anywhere? But at the same time, I think I've had a lot of time to reflect on all of this, and that's why I think going to Japan now is just it's a lot better for me, you know, because I think that initial experience, you realize, yeah, you know, I don't my ancestry is from here. I'm not from here, but there are a lot of aspects to Japan that I really love, and I think now I can go back and just sort of explore and have fun without having to say, okay, I've got to fit in, or I have to find, my culture, my roots. And I think, that sort of is the experience for a lot of, mixed Japanese, and even Japanese Canadians I talk to of the older generation. They don't like to go to Japan because they go there, they're Japanese, they're full Japanese, but they were never taught the language, because after World War II, you were never taught the language because of fear of accents or speaking a language other than English. And so a lot of that generation, the Sansei and even the Yonsei, they don't want to go to Japan because they feel alienated, that they look Japanese, but they can't speak the language, and they're in an even weirder place, I think, than I was, whereas I don't even look Japanese, right? So a lot of things.
You kind of
do. Yeah, I can see it. I can see it.
Maybe it's the lighting. I don't know.
Okay, great. Megumi, do you have any other questions or comments from the Hafu Film live feed that you'd like to share with everybody?
Sure. I think yeah, there's a question that I think it would be great if we could all answer, because it does come up a lot. I mean, our film is called Hafu, and one of the questions, this is from Go Maru Gogo, Malcolm Field. He asks why you persist with Hafu term when not many in the film really liked it. So he's asking kind of, I think it would be good if we can all, we can obviously, Laura and I can speak to why we chose that as the title of our film, but it would be great to hear everyone's perspective on, the different terms, Hafu, double, mixed, I think we all Hapa, and just kind of get all of our perspectives on that. For me, the Hafu film, I think for Laura and I, we were just kind of started making the film, and it was very straightforward to call it Hafu Film and make a URL, hafufilm.com, because people would know exactly what it was about. There was no if, and, or buts, So that's why we started it, and then I think as we kept on making the film, it just seemed more and more that, kind of leaving it very open and large left a lot of possibilities of what could be explored within the film. I know some people suggested that we call the film something to do with being a bridge. But I think that's something that, what I've discovered from talking to many half-Japanese people is that not everybody feels like they have to be a bridge between both of their countries, that it's not their purpose on Earth. And some people it is, but some people it's not. And I think that is kind of putting a very kind of subjective viewpoint on what the Hafu experience is supposed to be like. And so for us, or at least for me, it's just a very kind of, very inclusive term that we can put all of our experiences underneath. Laura, do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, and I mean, obviously I agree on everything you say, because we both chose the title together, and we went through a lot of brainstorming sessions, and we actually left it all the way to the end to decide what title we wanted to add. We always had the parentheses working title until the very, very end. But we finally decided that, what is this movie about? It's about being half Japanese, and in Japan, what's the most generally used term that people, recognize when you talk about somebody who's mixed race Japanese? It's Hafu. And to me, I mean, growing up, I always used the word. I never felt like it was a derogatory term for me, because it was what, the general people just use the word as in everyday use towards people who are mixed race Japanese. So it would actually be easier for me when I had to explain myself. I'd just be like, oh, it's because I'm Hafu, and then the conversation would just keep going, flowing. There wouldn't be any more questions about my background, my parents, or why on earth am I capable of speaking Japanese without sounding like a foreigner. So yeah, no, I mean, I've always used the term, and I know there's a lot of people who think it's a derogatory term, but the majority of these people are English background parents of children who are Hafu, and they, I understand the protectiveness of a parent towards your child. But I mean, you know, I think using a term like double doesn't really solve the problem. I think there shouldn't be a word that defines somebody of mixed race to begin with. I mean, that's my viewpoint of the whole thing. If there wasn't a word in the first place, then this wouldn't really be a problem. And people, you know, in Japan, maybe if it was more recognized that there are people who are mixed race Japanese, maybe the word hafu wouldn't be needed in everyday use. Anyway. Anybody else would like to talk about it?
Sure. I have mixed feelings about the word hafu, but because, like you said, it's like shorthand to have people understand. And for me, it's for lack of a better word that I would use a word like hafu. And like I said, I have mixed feelings about it, but I think that's okay. I think it's okay to not have, you know, a set opinion on the word hafu or what word should be used, because we're all different and we all have different opinions and we all have, you know, we're all coming from a different place. And so, you know, if that's the shorthand that will get people to kind of just click it and they'll get it, great. And but I don't like to use that term because, like Lara was saying, I don't think there needs to be a word because we are who we are. But then if we went on this principle, then your film wouldn't have a title. So, you know, I think it is what it is, you know.
I think there's in the film there's a line that during a mixed roots symposium, a scene in the film where a woman who is half Indian and half Japanese talks about whether she should just only be considered Japanese, and if all her friends, full Japanese friends, says, well, you're just Japanese and that's it and it's all good, she admitted that she felt like that somehow it was missing the full picture of who she was, that she is a little bit different than the full Japanese experience, and that for her the term that she likes to use is mixed roots, and that's also the name of Ed Sumoto's organization, which we feature in the film. So I think we're still in this stage where I think, you know, eventually we'd like to get to a Japan where these terms maybe don't exist, that we're all Japanese, but at the same time we do have to kind of self-define, and we should recognize that there is some difference in our experience at the same time, and this is one way to identify that difference, even though it's very varied, as Ivy mentioned.
I just hate having to explain myself and justify the way I look to people, justify my language skill, and it's, I don't know. Not to be negative, but to me it takes energy, and it's energy I don't particularly want to spend on every single person I go across.
But
yeah,
like Lara said, which was kind of interesting, is that having a word for it is kind of it comes in handy when you want to cut it short.
Yeah.
Because then you just say I'm half, and then you don't have to say all the things about your background and all that, because then that's it. Then you don't need to explain more. So in that way it comes in handy. But what I think is actually the most disturbing thing is not so much the word, but it's more the problem about having what's it called? I forgot the word. I'm sorry. Double nationality. Because in Japan it's still not acknowledged to have two nationalities, and that is, I would say, the kind of the essence of the problem. Because why should we choose? Because you cannot choose between. It's like when your parents divorce and you have to choose between your mother and your father, or you're like cut in half and you have to choose between something that's impossible because both countries define you, both cultures. So you cannot just say I'm only Japanese or I'm only American or I'm only Danish or whatever you are. And I think that is a much bigger problem than the word itself, because the word is more kind of so that you can communicate, I would say. So,
yeah, I often find that I get into kind of discussions, or we get a lot of emails. Well, I wouldn't say a lot, but like, you know, I would say every couple months we get an email that says, like, why did you call your film Hafu? Like, you know, how dare you call my children, blah, blah, blah. Like, see some of these angry emails. And what I see is that people get so caught in this discussion about the terminology that we get stuck and we don't go to the deeper issues. For example, this conversation about dual nationality, we don't go there because we're still discussing the terminology and how some people are offended that we who are Hafu can choose to use that term for ourselves. You know, this just kind of...
A lot of parents are like, you're calling my child half a person. They're not half a person, they're whole. And I'm like, I never said that. I mean, or like, they're half-breed. I mean, it's a term for animals. Well, you know, I don't think anybody who says that I'm half American thinks that they're calling themselves half animal. I mean, or half whatever. It's just the way that it is.
But I think the title is actually really good because as soon as you see the title, you just know what it is. You just know what it's about. You don't know whether it's good or bad, but you just know, okay, half, that's people that are half Japanese, because that's what people call us, what we call ourselves.
Yeah, that's totally true. Yeah, so it just you know, it serves just like having a normal one-to-one conversation. It serves its purpose. You see that word, you see it in katakana, and you know exactly what it's about. You know, we added the mixed race experience in modern-day Japan because for the people who are not connected to Japan, who don't know where this term comes from, we had a lot of people mispronounce the term. Like the other day I was on a radio show, it was like, Hafu, tell us about Hafu, and I'm like, what? It's Hafu. But thanks. Okay, well, I think I don't know if anybody has any more questions, or Megumi, if you saw any more Twitter questions that were interesting for us to answer. I think Yana, since she's not here, I'll bring up a topic that she wanted to bring up, which I am so terribly sorry again that she's not here with us right now. I really wanted to have her in. She actually told me that she was a finalist to a Miss Universe, the Miss Universe pageant, not for this year, but from another year, and that she wanted to talk about the perception of half Caucasian mixed girl models versus other mixes, and what does everybody think about that? You know how, like, recently the Miss Universe pageant is a half African American girl, and the media, you know, the foreign media is saying that there's backlash, but I feel like it's a little bit exaggerated because in Japan I don't know if there's been that much that many articles about the topic. But what does everybody think about this? Kim, for example, do you have any insights on what you think? Just to get some people talking.
I think it's really positive that she's been chosen. I think there is a lot of bias when you see the models. People in popular media, they're all tend to be like half Caucasian. I mean, even look at, is it Rola? She's half Bengali, but she doesn't, you know, she's obviously trying to look very blonde and blue-eyed, and I think, yeah, I think her success can only really be a positive influence on how people view things. But I think it's not even just African American, but the idea of mixed Asian hafu, that doesn't seem to come up a lot. I mean, there must be. I mean, I've even heard that the majority of mixed-race marriages in Japan are sometimes different Asian countries. For example, Korea or China or Singapore or wherever. And this doesn't seem to come up as much. I think people always look for hafu that look exotic or different, but I don't know how prevalent these people are in the media or how much kind of attention is focused on that, as opposed to someone who, like, for example, like the girl in Miss Universe, or I don't know if anyone's heard of Jero. Is it Jero, the enka singer, who's also part African American. So I don't know. It's a start. I'd like to be able to see more kind of diversity in the amount of people represented.
I had a bit of a thought about how I think, in Japan, in most of the magazines, you'll find that a big chunk of the models are actually half Caucasian, half white, half Japanese. And I think it's because, despite there not being very many people of European background in Japan, those beauty standards are still very prevalent. So you find those cosmetics advertising hafugao, but those...
That's offensive.
I just kind of roll my eyes at it because I'm just like, oh, this is so terrible, but like, it's like so bad it's almost funny for me personally.
That is so bad.
It's pretty terrible. That the features that the looks are going for are like the half European, big-eyed, big-nosed sort of look, and I just think it's really, I don't like it because I wish being Japanese, not aspiring to be anything else, and for us the same, not trying to aspire to be full Japanese or anything like that. I'm glad that there's a lot more representation of different mixes, and I just think that's sort of the way forward.
Just came to think that it's interesting to see that. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. That it's interesting that there's a lot of focus on the looks. People focus so much on the looks, so that if you're half, then you have a chance to be a model, or you can, you can achieve something by your looks, or you can be someone in a talent show or something like that. And it's very much like that in Japan, but I've also heard people in Europe saying, oh, if you're half Asian and half African, then your kids will just look beautiful. And it's not like, oh, I think your children will be smart or anything, but it's very much on the looks, And I kind of, it's a bit funny that it's like that. Maybe because it's an easy thought.
I'd like to bring up just we're chatting to Yana right now. Ivy is actively helping to get some answers from her beginning of her talk about how she became a finalist for Miss Universe one time. And she is saying that she was scouted in Omotesando by a French lady. And let me see. Right, a French woman who was the director, and she was scouted in Omotesando, but she thought that she shouldn't. So Yana thought she shouldn't represent Japan, but all of the other finalists surprisingly looked up to her. She was also a model at the time, so she helped with all the preparation. So Ivy asks, "Why did you think you shouldn't represent Japan?" And Yana answers, "Because I can't possibly represent Japan as well as a full Japanese. I have 3 other cultures I grew up with." So Ivy's asking, but what does it mean to represent Japan for you? And Yana answers, I have no problem not being considered full Japanese because I'm not. So what does everybody think about this? Any comments?
Yeah, I think that's fine in terms of, if that's how she identifies and I mean, wants to or sees that has multiple identities and that she's not full Japanese. I think that's completely fine. I mean, I think it was just in response to the crowning of, Ariana Miyamoto, and, she obviously identifies as Japanese. She grew up there. She has a Japanese mother and has Japanese citizenship, and she feels, I think, she maybe in one statement had a little apprehension, but I think she's kind of growing into feeling the confidence of being able to represent. And whatever I've seen of her, she said that she had a good feeling that she would win. So I think it's very exciting that she can represent Japan, and I think she in one way or another is kind of helping to redefine what it means to be Japanese, and certainly that you don't have to look a certain way to be considered Japanese, and I think that's really wonderful.
I think it's really positive too.
So Yana's saying that the director did not have a problem with her representing Japan. It was more herself who thought that she shouldn't represent Japan. So the director encouraged her to instead. So now it makes a little more sense.
So we're back to the original.
Exactly, story that we were reading out earlier on. So would any of you feel that way? Like, for me, like, of course, if I didn't grow up in Japan and culturally I didn't feel Japanese, then obviously I feel a little awkward trying to represent Japan. Like, I wonder how, because there's also like people who, in sports, you see a lot of, athletes who are half Japanese, but maybe they grew up elsewhere, but for the pure fact that they have, Japanese nationality, they can participate in the Olympics and represent Japan, and therefore they're representing Japan. So I wonder how people think about this. I heard recently that if it's for sports, it's good because, it means that it's more beneficial for the country to win. But if it's a beauty pageant, it's not the same thing. I think, Megumi, you mentioned something like that.
Yeah, I think it seems to be the issue of beauty is what people are really questioning, and what in a pageant of beauty contestants, what is the country's representation of beauty, and the person they select is who they're saying is representing, and I think that's why people feel that there's a difference between a beauty pageant and the Olympics, where that's more about your skill and athletic ability. So that seems to be why people feel that she isn't a good representation of Japan, because there's not enough mixed people yet.
So she's before her time.
Supposedly.
But I feel like there are a lot of mixed people in Japan. Like, I don't know, I keep meeting so many of them. Like,
but maybe not enough that it becomes, sorry to interrupt, but not that it becomes, that it's so commonplace that, people consider that part of the fabric of Japanese culture. I don't think we've gotten to that point yet.
Okay.
Well, definitely her crowning is a step forward, I think, towards that acknowledgement of that.
Yeah, no, it's like, to me it was a bit shocking because when I was, I used to get JSTV when I lived outside of Japan. I could watch Japanese television, and a lot of shows I always saw, mixed people, mixed kids hosting TV shows, and I thought, it's something so normal. It's normal to have, half Japanese people in the media, in magazines, and so, I thought it should be normal in a beauty pageant as well. Like, if they're being used, if they appear everywhere in the media in Japan, then why wouldn't they be able to? Why is it so shocking for them to be participating in a beauty pageant?
I think that says a lot about how there's still this huge gap between the perception of the Hafu models in the media and the reality, and they're seen as separate. And I think that story of Ivy saying, you know, the woman she saw on the train billboard or whatever, and her friend's reaction to it, I think that really shows that kind of huge gap between this is what Japanese society is like, and then here are the people who we put on the billboards. This is very different.
Yeah.
So the director said it was more important to get the goal of being Miss Universe, which should embrace multiculturalism. And Miss Universe isn't just about beauty. I wasn't worried about that part. I was more worried about the culturally not being able to represent the country. And so Ivy asked, like, how? Like not being able to play koto or something? Example. Well, I spent a good chunk of my life in Japan, but didn't go to school there very long. So my reading and writing skills are not up to par, and I don't know all the things that Japanese learned in school.
I wonder what's actually involved in the Miss Universe competition for Japan, anyways. Like, how do they judge? You know, like obviously it's not just about beauty. I don't even know what the criteria is. So
there's a word that they use when they crown. When they choose Miss Universe, that she has to be a woman who's not only beautiful but also has the skills and intelligence that are superior, or something like that. I would have to
superior language skills.
I don't know. No, like just like generally, like she's not only beautiful but she's also smart and culturally engaging or something like that. Enough to represent the country.
To obviously win a pageant, you have to feel it from yourself that you are the best representative, and you can, you have that confidence in yourself that you are meant to be that representative. And I think, you know, what maybe distinguishes, you know, Miss Universe Japan today is that she really feels that she is Japanese and doesn't question the I'm not Japanese enough. The only thing that is being questioned is her looks right now. So that's I think a difference that I can see just based on what I'm hearing through this chat conversation.
Sometimes it's also some like sorry. Sometimes people tell you, or I've been told sometimes, oh, you're more Japanese than 100% Japanese, or they would say sometimes about my father that he's very Japanese, although he's Danish, and I think you can that it's also about like how involved you are, or how much interest you have in the culture and history and all these things, and sometimes if you grow up somewhere and this is like your normal life in this culture, then sometimes you don't really feel the need to read so much about it or know more about it, because that's just how it is, and so sometimes it's not the 100% racial heritage person who is the best the best person to represent a place, because they might not actually have studied it so much or put so much effort into understanding it. So I think actually that people that have mixed backgrounds sometimes are better at representing another culture, whether it's the Japanese side or the other side, because they also have the perspective of seeing it from two different sides, so they can also explain it in a better way sometimes.
Because they're more aware of it too.
Yes.
Okay, well, anyway, I know this is a very interesting conversation. We've had everybody participate so far. I think it's been a great session as our first live Google Hangouts to talk about the half Japanese experience, but unfortunately, I think we've gone over 1 hour, like about, I don't know, 2 hours and a half maybe. So anyway, I think I'd like to finish somewhere around here. It's been great having all of you people here today. I just want to make some last remarks. We're going to have another live chat next Sunday. Let me share the event. Let me see. Next Sunday, April 4th. DVD comes out April 3rd. Don't forget. You can always go buy it on our homepage. Okay, let me share all these screens so that everybody can see. 3Ws, hafufilm.com, buy and rent. If you attended the screening, loved the movie, and you also wanted to buy a copy, now you can. We're taking pre-sales. 皆様、DVD を購入したい方は、hafufilm.com buy and rent に行っていただければと思います。あとは、忘れずに、ライブツイッターのフィード、に参加している皆様、限定版 DVD が当たります。一番興味深いコメントや質問。So we are still open to choosing the most interesting comment or question via Twitter on hafufilmlive. You can win a free DVD signed by the directors. We are going to choose them. We're choosing one today and one on our next session. So make sure you all participate if you want a copy. Okay, and next session will be April 4th, 7 p.m. It is April 5th in Japan, 11 a.m. in the morning. I am excited because we will have special guests Edward Yutaka Asumoto and Marsha Yumi Lise participating in our event next Sunday. So don't miss out. I think we're going to have a very interesting conversation, as interesting as the one that we've had today. I want to thank again everybody for being here with us, and I am excited to talk to you all again sometime soon. それでは皆様、今日は本当に、参加していただいた皆様ありがとうございます。来週の日曜日に、もう一度 Google ライブイベントをやりたいと思います。来週のイベントの、スペシャルゲストは、ミックスルーツの、エドワード、津本エドワードと、ユミ、リゼ、マーシャ、ハーフプロジェクトの、担当者が、参加していただきますので、ぜひぜひ、ご覧ください。Okay, so thank you very much, and we will stop the broadcast. Thank you.
All right, thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.